Do I sound good? I look all right. Can we tighten this shot up some?
We will in post.
Okay, cool. To like
Yeah.
here.
Kind of like how the news video looks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got you. It's on my shirt. I can't have nothing nice. Where is that? It's on that side. Dang.
Did you upload the new brief, by the way?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. I was trying to think because then I tried to put it into Opus Clip and it's like, we're not accepting YouTube links right now. I was like, Grant, what do you want me to do? So it's not super long. I may just go into Filmora and split it up.
And cut it up. Okay.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing because all that news is super outdated by now anyway. But it'd make good reels or good shorts.
I don't know if it was outdated.
Not all of it
because there
would
wasn't
be.
anything like pressing.
Well, the bomb thing was pretty tight because everybody was talking about that. But
yeah,
it's all good.
I noticed I like uploaded it and I was like, let me go. He still ain't done nothing.
Yeah, I didn't see it for several hours. Just text me when you're like, hey, I uploaded it. Okay.
I think I left my phone here when I went to do things.
Oh, you may have. But I forget sometimes that there's supposed to be one in the can, and I'm like, oh, yeah. And I'll see it, 9 hours later. Like, uploaded 9 hours ago. I was like, oh, that's supposed to be last night. Anywho, it's time. This can be in the episode, I guess. It's just time for us to stop just getting on base. You know what I mean? We've had the Moneyball mindset for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've like, just get on base, just get on base, just get an episode in the can. And like, that's great. And I don't know that we could do episodes better than we're doing episodes, but like the mindset of like winning, I guess, has got to be more so than just get on base. That's good. If you get on base enough times, eventually you get around and score runs, but you got to field the ball too. And the Oakland A's didn't do that. And that's why they lost in the ALCS with a very high on-base percentage. But we're not here to talk about baseball. We are here to talk about a sensitive subject. This is going to be a little bit of a throwback episode in that it's just me. Tango's here, but he's going to be only lightly involved in this episode. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It may turn out to be something heavy. But we're also going to talk about a church-related topic. We haven't directly done that in quite a while. It comes up in most episodes because that's just kind of what we do here. But we're talking about church hurt today. This has been in my orbit, I think is how I pitched it to you earlier. I was like, this subject just keeps coming back around. Somebody mentions it, something that happened to them at church or recently, maybe a long time ago, or, happened to somebody they know. And so church hurt is this term that we have, right? When you get hurt by something that happened at church. Like, well, what does that mean? Well, it could mean a bajillion different things, right? It could mean that I was at a church once where they ran the youth pastor and his wife off, who were also involved in the worship team, because it was like a Wednesday night thing, and they had just come from this outdoor thing they were doing, and they hurried and hustled and got to church. And for some reason, somehow, she ended up on stage with shorts on. And that was pretty much the end of their time at that church. They weren't inappropriate length or anything. I just got louder in my ear. Was that what you were going for? Okay. We're good. It's not overbearing. It's better. But so it was just one instance, and it turned into this thing. And it didn't get super blown up. They just left, and it was over. One time I visited a church that I'd never been in before in my life, and I didn't know a soul, and I was going to listen to, I forget if it was somebody singing or a preacher that I was going to hear. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I went in and I sat down. I got there kind of early because I just like to get places early. If you're on time, you're late. But I'm sitting in this pew in this church it's 150 years old now. Probably this would have been 30-ish years ago. Not 30, maybe 20. But I'm sitting down in this, all of a sudden I get a tap on my shoulder, and I look up, and there's this nice looking old lady. She seemed like she was nice by appearance, and turns out not so much, because she says, "Hey, you're sitting in my seat." And I was like, the place was virtually empty. It was me and this lady and 4 other people at this point. I was like, "Yeah, I'm in your seat." She was like, yeah, I've been sitting there for 35 years. I was like, so on this pew, like how wide of an area should I move over? You know, do I have to get out of your seat? Do I need to go to a different, is anybody allowed to sit on this row with you? You know, so there's just ridiculous things that happen at church. I don't know how much it happens anymore, but it used to be really hard to walk into a church with long hair as a man. And it should be. Don't be a hippie. Cut your hair. I'm just kidding. But stuff like that, you know, and I know people that were like, well, I'm never going back to church because they told me I needed to cut my hair, or I had too many tattoos, or maybe it wasn't that you had a tattoo. Maybe it was that you have a naked woman tattooed on your arm and they would just like you to cover it up, you know, and I don't want to, I don't say that to dismiss church hurt for what it is. Like, it's a real thing. It actually happens. And I've given some like extreme circumstances, but there are real things that happen, real circumstances that play out, life events, family dynamics change, stuff happens, and there are disagreements, and those disagreements sometimes don't cause the permanent rift, but we allow them, we'll say, to cause the permanent rift. And people don't feel like they belong in that church anymore. And then it turns into, I don't want to go to church at all. So we got to be careful with that, right? Because as believers, we're supposed to go to church. You're supposed to as a believer. It's not optional. That's the tough part. You know, we treat it as something that's optional. So like I go to work 5 days a week or 6 days a week maybe, or whatever, and I only get 1 or 2 days to sleep in and relax and do what I want to do. And we're like, well, why isn't church one of those things? It has to be for us. And it ain't even about whether or not we want to. I told you this was going to step on toes. It's not about whether or not we want to. It's what we have to do as believers. We look at a verse like Hebrews 10:25 that says, not forsake the gathering together, so that we can edify and uplift each other, even more so as the day approaches. You know, the day that we think of as, you know, the day. But it's important. We have to meet with other believers. We have to gather together. You and your 2 buddies meeting for coffee on Tuesday mornings we stretch that sometimes and be like, well, I got my church in for the week. Well, did you? Like, what were you doing? Just because you were also in a room with some other believers doesn't mean you were at church. You know, you can say, well, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to McDonald's makes you a hamburger. Well, that's true too. But if you're saying you're a Christian, you're supposed to gather with other Christians. If you've listened to the podcast before and you go far enough back, you know, we talked about a lot of church stuff, and it's not an easy thing to do. We've talked about this before. It's not an easy thing to do to walk into a church for the first time. So whatever reason you had for leaving a church, and there's plenty of perfectly good reasons to leave a church, not the church, but to leave a church. Plenty of good reasons. Stuff happens, right? People do things. People ruin everything. People are the worst. But there are reasons to leave a church, right? But you can't not go to church. Like you don't have that option as a believer. But it is super hard to walk into a new church. It's terrifying, especially if you don't know anybody there. We went through this a while back, and you can go back to our episode. It was called Church Shopping. I don't know what number that was.
Yeah, that was the one you and Chris.
Yeah. But we talked about how hard it was to find a new church, and we had just found a new church. My wife and I and our family, I had been a pastor. Our church essentially ran its course, and we decided to close it down, which meant we all had to find somewhere else to go to church. And we talked about what that process was like. So we went to churches where we knew people, and that was cool. That made it a lot easier, even though it was, it's still tough because they do things differently than we did, and you had to look at, what you could live with in terms of what you liked about it and what you didn't. It was easier to go with people that we knew and be around some folks that we were familiar with and stuff like that. We went to some churches where we didn't know anybody, and that is incredibly difficult. But that's just part of the process, and I hate that it's got to be a hard thing to do. I say it's hard. It may not be hard for you. I know people that enjoy meeting new people and having these experiences. In spite of the fact that I'm a podcaster and have been a pastor and I don't mind speaking in front of a room of people, I am incredibly introverted. I don't mind talking to a group, in front of the room. I don't want all of those people to come talk to me individually. Like, it just wears out. I've got to have a nap after I have a conversation with more than like 4 people at a time. So maybe it's not as hard for you from that into things, talking to people and meeting new folks, stuff like that. I don't especially enjoy it, but it's just part of it. We have to, and I have to get past that and go, well, I don't like meeting a bunch of people, but the Bible tells me I have to gather with other believers. Like I said, it's not easy. Maybe it's harder for some of us than it is for others, but it's necessary, and it's not worship as a whole is not about us. We want it to be what we want. This is what I like, and the church does it the way that I like, and they sing the style of music is what I like. Well, what are the words that we're saying? What words are the preachers saying? What words are the lyrics of the song? Do they mirror what's in the Bible, or do they make us feel warm and fuzzy? Because you can go to church and hear sound teaching all day, every day, and not get the warm and fuzzies. In fact, sometimes you should feel like you're having your toes stepped on, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe like this podcast if you're listening to it right now. But that's just part of it. It's not about us. We're going to worship God and learn more about Him so we can worship Him better. And, maybe that's like Drew was on, I guess it was our last episode, and he had talked about living in a little town in Nebraska. Drew and his wife both grew up Southern Baptist. And for those of us in Rome, Georgia, I can throw a rock from here and hit a Southern Baptist church, and then I can pick it up and throw it and hit another one. But in this town where they lived, there were no Southern Baptist churches. There was a Roman Catholic church, and there was a Lutheran church. And if you had to pick one of those as a Southern Baptist, like maybe you can go to the Lutheran church, unless it's the sketchy offshoot. But what? God bless you, Lutherans. I love a lot of you guys. I love all of you, but I tolerate some of you. But you get in a situation like that where there's just not an option. Well, what do you do? Well, like if they lived an hour away from Omaha and Lincoln, they were kind of in a weird place in the middle. So maybe you drive an hour to go find a church that you like. But you got to find a church. So, and I had this thought just now and kind of go in a different direction. If you have a church, the pastor of your church should be your favorite preacher. It's a thought I had this morning. So my pastor, Tango perks up. So are you buzzing or am I? Okay. So my pastor preached this morning. We're in 1 Peter, and he's talking about what it means to be a pastor. Not like the qualifications for pastor, but what it is to be a pastor, be a servant, be a messenger, be all these things. And I told him afterwards, I was like, man, I wish that I had heard that message before I became a pastor myself, because it really spelled out what it meant to be a pastor, apart from, husband of one wife and able to teach, and the qualifications that we get for being a pastor from the Bible. This is what the pastor does. And I was like, that's fantastic. And I really love his preaching, but I've heard people say, well, so-and-so is my favorite preacher. I was like, well, you don't go to his church. What do you think about your pastor's preaching? Like, is he pretty good? Or like, well, and I realized today, I was like, yeah, I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought that he wasn't my favorite preacher, but I'm like, man, LeGree Price is my favorite preacher. Like, you have to nail that down, or you have to go to somebody else's church. Go ahead. You got thoughts?
I was just going to agree with you and say, yeah, I mean, as somebody who's a little estranged from church right now, who's kind of left on bad terms, whatever.
Church hurt, yeah.
That is what it is. But I know I can point to a pastor that I would follow, and that would be Ron Kanzler.
Yeah. And
he kind of encompassed a lot of the same ideals that you talk about right there, where I'm like, oh, this is the dude. He knows how to talk to me and get me on fire for it. So like, I can see where you're going with that. And then, there have been other pastors, but none that I grew that bond with. But I think it also goes deeper because your pastor, we were just having some conversations, and like you and your pastor actually do things in fellowship outside that's not necessarily church things. Like you guys kind of get that bond outside. Well, that goes a longer way.
That was what separated Ron from a lot of pastors too. Ron invested time in people. You know, he wanted to minister to the people, and sometimes that meant stepping down from the pulpit and being there and going and doing stuff. And you can't go to everybody's T-ball games. You know, there's just not time. But there's time for some stuff, or you can facilitate. It doesn't have to be one-on-one. It's a group thing. There was a bunch of us yesterday from church that went to swim in the creek. You know, and they were there. The pastor was there with us. So, like, I'm in the water, the same freezing neck-deep water, pulling our kids would come down this waterfall in these inner tubes, and we would catch them and, like, shuffle them back to the shore or whatever, and made this chain of dads that would do it. But I'm in the same water with my pastor, and he's out there doing the same thing. He's not up on top of the rocks, you know, pointing at us going, hey, you got to, whatever. But you facilitate those things as a pastor, and Ron did a really good job of that. And when I went to Ron's church and he was my pastor, he was my favorite preacher.
But Ron, it kind of normalizes them too, and it's not this big scary dude who's preaching fire and brimstone. Yeah. And you kind of get to see them at their best points and their worst points when you have that bond. Well,
and a lot of preachers are scared, and this is where the church hurt goes both ways, because things happen to pastors too. Like I know as a pastor, there were times that I felt betrayed. And every pastor does. So you think, you know, now somebody hears this and they go, well, LeGree went and hung out with them, but he didn't hang out with us. Like, well, okay. What, did you invite him, or did you just expect him to show up? You know, and did you invite him to do something on a day where his kid had a T-ball game and he, you know, needed to be there? Because you're the pastor of your home first. So maybe it just hadn't worked out yet. It's not that he hates you or doesn't have time for you or whatever. You know, he's got a life too. So that's got to go both ways. But there are guys that are really good at that. Ron was one of them. LeGree is one of them. They want to relate to the people. LeGree illustrated today by stepping from behind the podium and saying, you know, this is, I can be pastor, but I also want to look at this from a church member perspective and say, well, are we doing what's best for the church? And am I what's best for the church? Am I doing as well as I can be doing? Am I living up to what a pastor is supposed to be? And it's not just preaching. Preaching is the smallest part of what a pastor does, because it's 1 hour-ish, you know, out of the week.
Yeah. And to many people, it just depends on how much you retain from that 1 hour, but it's the everything outside. Yeah. That's where you kind of get to do the more pastoral things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what happens when Uncle Bob falls down the steps in the middle of the night? Like, who do they call? They call the pastor. Somebody dies and there's a funeral. Who they call? The pastor. Somebody's getting married. They call the pastor. Aunt Linda's having surgery. Pastor's got to go to the hospital and see her. My pastor's bivocational. He's got a job, you know, and a lot of guys out there do. So you look and you go, well, the pastor couldn't be there, and they just sent us a deacon. Well, like, that's biblical. That's what they're supposed to do. That's why those guys are there. So, like, you know, he's got his life and he's got his bills to pay. And if we wanted to pay him enough money to make him quit his job, then it might close our church, you know, to have to. We've talked about that before too. Yep. The church having so much money and only goes so far. So you can expect that guy to be everywhere all the time. Or you can, you know, kind of leave him to himself and let him be a good preacher and the best pastor that he can be. But that's the two-way street, I guess, of being, because you can be mad at the pastor, or he can feel hurt and betrayed by you. And that's tough, you know, and we earn it in both directions. Sometimes the pastor does things that he's not supposed to do. And so he earns a little bit of that, not a betrayal, but, you know, that he's got some accountability that he's got to live up to. But we do too. I've mishandled situations in church before. It happens, you know, because we've got this book that tells us how to behave, but it doesn't, I don't know, I can't say that it doesn't give us details on how to leave a church. Like there's a time and a place to do that, and we don't always do. I haven't done that right before. I can probably count multiple times that I've messed that up. So I can imagine where somebody felt hurt by me.
Yeah. When you think of the book, and I don't think it's necessarily a set of rule book, it's a guideline. It's a, hey, this is how we should operate.
Yeah. Well, and if you love your neighbor, aka your pastor, you'll go to him and be like, hey, we're leaving and this is why, and it's either a good reason or it's not. And if it's not, then he may say, well, let's try to look at it from a different direction. Hopefully it's not, everybody's like, well, he wants you to stay because of how much money you're giving. Well, shut up. That's stupid. Maybe, I guess there are pastors out there that'll do that, but like I've never written a check big enough to a church where they're like, we can't lose that guy. We were just talking about my previous career that I spent most of my adult life in, and it was all I could do to buy a can of tuna fish, much less write a huge check to the church. But yeah, I don't know. There's a time to leave, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it.
Here's a thought for you. With the current generation and the current labor pool, this kind of goes on a different tangent, but the current like trendy thing is quiet quitting, is do the absolute bare minimum.
I've done that in the church
and
before.
That's what a lot of people are doing, is the
Yeah.
bare minimum. Let me show up for an hour.
Yeah.
Let me just do whatever and put on a good face. But is that what we want to do, or is that just why are we quiet quitting church?
Well, because we know we're supposed to go to church, but when I left Cassville, I completely dropped the ball in the way that I left that church. Jessica was going back to school, and because of that, her work schedule was going to have to change because we couldn't just get by on my money, so she had to work, which meant she had to work Sundays, and it was going to be really tough. We had little kids at the time, and I was like, well, we'll go, because we were driving we were driving close to 40 minutes one way to go to church, and it was tough to get up and get the kids ready myself, and I was an idiot, and I knew dad and all that stuff, but so we just stopped going to church. But I built myself in an excuse because I had volunteered with the youth group for, 10 years. I had taught Sunday school. I was a deacon. I had done, so many things. And I honestly was burned out. And I saw that moment and I said, this is a good time for me to get out of here. Because I had just been overwhelmed for years. I was exhausted. And this happens. Like there's nothing wrong with admitting that you're burned out and you're tired, because we abuse volunteers in church. We were talking about this beforehand, like the strain that VBS can put on your church and your volunteers, because you have like the 80-20 rule in church. They always say where 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, and that is 100% true. And your people get burned out, and that's what happened to me. And I saw an opening, and I took it, and I got out of there. And I look back at that now, and I hate the way that I did that. Because I'm sure there are people who felt betrayed and felt like I let them down. So I, in that instance, in leaving the church, caused church hurt for people. I didn't leave because I was hurt. I left because I was tired. I wanted the easy way out.
You took a better bridge than me.
Well, yeah. But you had different circumstances than me. You went through a different thing. And, there are good reasons to leave a church. And if you can't stay in that church and remain peaceful with fellow believers in that church, it's time for you to go. You're the problem at that point, right? Like,
right.
Not that you started the issue, but if you can't live with what's going on, you got to go.
So, yeah. That was kind of me. Man, you kind of just put it in perspective. Yeah. I punched my ticket. I realized, hey, I can't be here. Bye.
I'm in the way now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether it's you being upset or you just can't like go along with the vision, this is where the church is headed, and I don't think that's where the church ought to head. And I've left for that reason also. Like, this is where the church is headed, and I handled it much better that time. But I was like, hey, this is not. And I look at the Bible, and I don't think that's what it says about what we're doing here. So I'm going to get out of the way.
So this is kind of a funny one that ties to that, and I think you've realized it over the past couple of years. Me and you have spent time together, and you've watched kind of the the small transformation of me going from where I was heavy into the I want the concert, I want the lights, I want the everything.
Yeah.
I was heavy into that.
We were both there though. I had that time too.
I was the guy. I did it. I loved it. And now I've kind of pulled back and I'm like, I don't want that anymore. I want something more that's more substantive.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so now how do we shop around for that? Which goes back to church shopping.
You just have to, you got to go to churches that you don't like for a while. You know, like you have to go inside the room and see what's happening and decide that ain't for me. And we had to do that, you know, and one of those churches, the pastor's a dear friend, and we had a conversation. You know, I was like, hey, I love your preaching. You got great programs. You got a lot of stuff going on, but this is just not for us. I feel like we're supposed to be somewhere else. And that is the key, right? Instead of just ghosting the place, you say, hey, you know, maybe one day down the road we'll see, but for now we're supposed to be somewhere else. This whatever it is not for us. And hopefully it's a good reason. It's the best if you can point to the scripture and say, hey, you guys do this, and I think we ought to do this. And not that the church that I'm talking about was doing things unscripturally. It just wasn't, you know, where we felt like we fit in or could be used was the biggest thing.
So you've been on both sides.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of done the quiet quit thing. You've done the proper thing when you give all the, hey, here's what's going on. Here's why I can't. How do you recover from that church hurt from your point of view? Because you're a former pastor. You're now attending a church that you love, that you're on fire for, that's fantastic fit for you. How do you recover from like that point where you said, I'm going to bail?
Yeah.
I'm not going to bail Christianity. I'm going to just bail right now and try and figure out where to go.
Yeah.
How'd you figure
it? I had to get somewhere where we felt comfortable in a new church. Right. I realized that what I had done was I handled it poorly and I had hurt feelings and things like that. But I couldn't just remain in some limbo and try to repair those relationships while I also tried to lead my family into some new place. So we had to find a new place. And once we had done that, I had to repair relationships like one at a time. And not everybody wanted to repair a relationship, and I can't, you can't control that, and I hate that. And there are people who I've run into and talked to since that didn't have an issue with me, and that was always a relief because that was a two-way street. Because I'm like, I wasn't mad at anybody. It just I was burned out, and I took the easy way out and wanted to get out of there. But it was nice I've had people approach me and be like, hey, I hope you're doing all right. Saw on Facebook where you guys joined this church, or that when we started our church, stuff like that. And that's a big relief. But it's just all you can do is repair relationships one at a time. And you've got to be in a good place to do that. Like I had to forgive myself before I could start expecting other people to. So I had to get past that point and look at what I had done and what was right and what was wrong about it. And there was more wrong about it than right. But yeah, I had to get to that place myself before I could start going back and going, hey, and it was a little different for me. And I guess it might be for you too, because I lived in a different town from where I went to church. So like I didn't bump into these people. So it's been years now, and every now I'm passing through there and I'll stop at the Quick Trip and I bump into somebody that I used to go to church with in that town and go, oh, hey, cool. How you doing? Your kids are all grown up now,
Right.
So that's kind of how. But I had to get to that place myself first. I had to get into a stable church situation, and I had to be able to forgive myself for the way that I handled things. And then I could forgive, anything on the back end were that the case.
All right.
So, that's the place to start. And don't be like, I didn't do anything wrong. Because you did. You mishandled something,
Right. But I'm
not getting on you. I'm talking in general terms.
I was like, general terms.
Yeah.
If someone was to come and be like, hey, how do I get past that church hurt phase and like start going back? And I think you've done a really great explanation on like the kind of steps you go through for that.
Yeah. Well, and talking to the people like when we just joined our church, we officially became members back in April, I guess, and had gone through the new member class and all those things. But there are conversations that you have with people, And what you end up finding out is other people have had church hurt too. And they've been through these things too. So like people get it, they understand. And then you say, well, you know, what did you do and how do you feel about being here now and how far have you come since then? And they go, well, we were at so-and-so church and such happened and there was a split and half of us left and half of us stayed and then it got ugly, whatever. So it happens. And I think if you spend your entire life in church, it's going to happen to you sooner or later. And it, you know, varying degrees or whatever. And you may be the one getting hurt or the one causing the hurt, but and maybe both at different points. But I think it happens to all of us. So it's important for us to be able to get to a place where we can get past it. But it's a time thing, you know. And hopefully the other side is willing to help you make amends. But you chase God first, you know. After, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You know, the damage is done, but you do have to figure out how you can get it. But if you're still hurt and still broken yourself, you can't go backwards and repair relationships either. And some of that will help you recover, but to get to a place yourself where you're like, okay, I'm stable now and I'm on the right track. I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. I need to go back and seek forgiveness or give forgiveness. And that's hard because I always say it's a lot easier for me to forgive you if I don't have to look at you anymore. You know, that's tough. But sometimes to forgive people means you've got to look at them in the face and have that conversation. That's hard. We don't want to do that. We just want to be right and win, you know. I know, I'm good with you. But at one side, you can offer forgiveness. You can't force anybody to accept it. So it doesn't matter. You know, it's only up to you to try if you feel like that's what you're supposed to do. And that's, you know, but it's tough to be like, hey, I just want to let you know that I've forgiven you. And they're like, well, oh yeah, well, I still think you're a scumbag. You know, well, okay, I gave it my best shot. And that's really all you can do. And that's eating a little crow, you know, and some humble pie on the side. But that's just what it is. It's what we're supposed to do as believers. Forgiveness is like at the top of the list. So, you know, it ain't what we want, but if we're doing what we're supposed to do, we get to do a lot of things that we don't want to do. Yeah, it's hard. But so we find reasons, right, to leave church and to decide that we're hurt. Michael Tate, the name ring a bell?
Yep.
Okay. So Michael Tate was famously the lead singer of the Newsboys forever. And then even before that, he was with a little group called DC Talk. These were Christian musicians. I don't know, would you call DC Talk a band? It wasn't a band. It was like a group, I guess. Newsboys is a band.
It was like a super band.
Yeah, I guess so, because it was made up of guys from other bands that had been big in the Christian contemporary music scene. Well, it comes out recently, that Michael Tate had been, you know, he's been this Christian artist for all these years. And then behind the scenes, he's abusing drugs and or alcohol, some combination thereof, and other men sexually. And that's just horrible. Like the stuff that comes out now where you go, well, was Michael Tate even a Christian? Or was he just making that kind of music because he didn't want his mom to hear him cussing? You know, like, because that's the thing too. Guys will start a Christian band because they need their mom early on to drive them to the concert. And we're like, well, I can't say those words if my mom's here, so we got to be a Christian band or whatever. So you look at that and you go, well, was Michael Tate even a Christian? And I hear somebody say, it was on social media. Somebody says, people like Michael Tate are the reason I don't go to church. Come on, man.
It's a terrible excuse.
Right. Well, like Michael Tate doesn't, like he said he was a Christian and then he did things that led you to believe that he wasn't, but he's never stood in between you and a church door, like physically. And I know it's deeper than that and we'll get there.
Yeah.
But
I think as a human, most of us are going to look for some sort of excuse and some reason out.
Right.
We're all going to try and weasel our way out at some point. Because there's a little scumbag in all of us that says, I want to be a terrible person.
As long as we wear this meat suit, we'll be at least some part scumbag.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Eve.
Yeah, right. Not all her faults. People like Eve's, why I don't go to church? But we use that as a crutch. It's this thing, right, where I can point to that guy. Well, like, so who's another famous musician that doesn't profess Christianity? Does Bruno Mars stop you from going to church? You know, like, what are we looking at? Is it just because he said he was a Christian, or is it because you don't want to go to church? Michael Tate's not stopping you from going to church. I heard a quote this morning. My Sunday school teacher, David Ogden, brought it up, and I think it was R.C. Sproul. You didn't know Ogden's my Sunday school teacher. I think it was R.C. Sproul, and somebody had told him, I don't go to church because it's full of hypocrites. And he said, well, church is not full of hypocrites. There's plenty of room for one more. So that's a knife in the heart, right? But it's true. How many times do you hear that? Somebody goes, too many hypocrites. How many times have you said that? Maybe you've been the person that said it. I don't want to go because of all the hypocrites. Just be the rotten sinner that you are in the open, right? And you won't be a hypocrite. But the fact that you're going to church means that on some level, you know that it's the right thing to do and you're trying. Like, hopefully that's the mindset at least. There's obviously exceptions to every rule. But you can't point to somebody else and go, well, they're the reason I don't go to church. Nah, I mean, church hurts real, but I don't know, take a Sunday off, rub some dirt on it and get back in there. But it's tough. It's hard. There's Sundays when I wake up and I don't want to go to church. I go, I can sleep till noon today, except that my 3-year-old is going to come jump on my head with a gallon of milk. I need chocolate milk first thing in the morning. But there's days I don't want to go. There's days when it's not like, high on my list of stuff I want to spring out of bed for. But it's not about me. And if I want my kids to understand that church is important, I've got to go when I don't necessarily feel like it. That's the hard part. And that's on your side of things, or any young single person's side of things. They don't have that, the tiny consciences running around looking up at them going, are we going to go to church today or are we going to sleep late?
No.
Okay.
It's two giant dogs up there that are like, oh, you're going to stay home with me today? Okay.
Yeah, one more day. How about a steak, Dad? Let's do it.
Exactly. Yeah, as a younger millennial, it is a lot harder. And some of us will admit, we may throw excuses, but there's some of us that'll hold our feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first time I walked into Cassville. That was the first church I joined as an adult. And I remember the first time I walked in there, and I was younger than you. I was in my mid-20s probably. I might have been 26 or 7. And I went there for a Christmas service the first time and didn't know a soul. And I remember what that was like. So, it's easier to walk in with your family than it is as a single person to just show up for church one time. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it wasn't any more difficult for a young single person. But it's just a different dynamic. When they see you come with your family, they want to run out and go, well, hey, let's help you get your kids signed up for nursery and let you know we've got a women's thing on Tuesday and the men's thing is on Saturday morning, and then we do the, this and that. So there are multiple angles where they can engage with you when you don't really have that as a young single person. You're either just a dude or just a girl by yourself, and okay. So how big a check can you write? I mean, but I don't know. We find reasons. We look for things. We decide that our feelings are hurt. I ain't going back. So is your issue with that church or is your issue with the church? It's probably not with the church, because there's a church somewhere, right? That's the perfect church. Don't go to the perfect church because you'll mess it up. But there's a church somewhere you can live with and you can get into, and it's just a process of finding it. But if you have issues, if you're hurt by every church that you go to, it's probably not everybody else's fault. And I'm going to look right in the camera as I say that. It's not everybody else's fault if you're always hurt by church. Not everybody's out to get you. Not everybody has abused you. Not everybody has mistreated you or misled you in some way. You got to look in the mirror at some point and go, hey, maybe it's me. Maybe it's something I'm doing. Maybe I'm not open to, following the rules. people talk about the authority of the church and things like that. There's some authority there that you're supposed to follow, and I don't know. We don't want to submit to any kind of authority. We want to make our own rules. We want to sleep late on Sunday, and if the pastor isn't also a Georgia Bulldog fan, then like whatever. I'm not going to that church because I don't like that guy. He's probably a Democrat, voted for Hillary Clinton. I don't want to go. We can come up with all kinds of reasons, and we're going to talk around in circles here if we're not real careful. But if you don't, wow, that's unprofessional. If you don't have a church home, it's because you're not looking for one. I say maybe you are looking for one, but either you haven't found it yet or you're not looking for one. And I knew this was going to step on toes. I had the idea for this podcast this morning in Sunday school because of that quote that I shared earlier. It's not easy. It's not always fun, but it's what we're supposed to do. And you're needed somewhere. They approached me at church. Did I tell you about this? Asking me to work. So they're like, hey, you're a podcaster. You've got some experience with AV stuff. Like, would you like to join the AV ministry? And I was like, Tango, if I can bring the couch, we can probably get Tango up here too. But I don't know how to push I can push a button, but I don't know what it's going to do. But so everybody, you got a spot. Maybe it's not, maybe you're not on the AV team. Maybe you're a door greeter. Like that's almost as important as the pastor, the door greeters. One of the greatest impressions a church ever made on me, we went and visited a church. And even if you are a church member somewhere and you love your church, you should visit another church occasionally just to see a different perspective. Not even looking for another church is not what I mean. Don't leave your church. But sometimes you're on vacation and you still need to go to church. So like visit another church sometime. But one of the greatest impressions ever made on me by a church was a guy in Cartersville. It was on Tennessee Street, which is the old like main drag through town. And you had to park across the street from the church. It was the one that used to be in the bar, or was in the bar. Cross Point, that's the one. And a guy saw us getting out of our car, and I've got our young son. I'm carrying him at this point. He's real little. And Ayla, our daughter, was probably 4 or 5. And he runs out in traffic, almost gets hit by a car to like come out and meet us and stop traffic so we can get across the street with our kids, and he can take us and show us where the nursery is and help us find coffee and all this stuff. The dude actually risked his life to try to get us in the church door. Looking back, like, was it necessary? Well, no, but I'm talking about it, 12 years later on this podcast. So like it sticks with me. And I think about that anytime I walk into a church now. I don't expect you to run out and risk your life, but there should be somebody at the front door who's nice and friendly and not going to come up to you in 10 minutes and go, hey, you're sitting in my seat. I'll help you come in and find a seat and help you get your kids in the nursery, or not if that's not your thing. Nobody sits here. You can have this seat. Nobody's been, for 35 years, whatever. But that door greeter person is a big deal. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's not your thing because you don't like talking to people. There's something you can do. The grass needs to be cut at church. Sometimes limbs have to be cut. The floor needs to be vacuumed. But there's plenty of things to do that don't involve you standing in front of a room full of people talking. More people are afraid of public speaking than death, which is just wild. I would much rather talk in front of people than die. But somewhere needs you. You know what I mean? Somewhere your services, your skills, your heart, your mindset is needed somewhere. Somebody needs you. If it's just another smiling face in the pew that's there to encourage somebody else. And maybe it's not at that one church because those people are there that hurt your feelings or whatever. And that is what it is. Again, you kind of got to check yourself on that and see if maybe you're not the problem. And if you can kind of nail it down that you're not, then you're good to go. But find somewhere. There are plenty of churches out there. You might have to drive. If your favorite preacher lives 8 hours away, you should consider relocating or fall in love with your own preacher. But I think we're going to jump off there. You got anything else to add? Going to throw anybody under the bus while the mic's still hot?
Nah.
Different episode, right? All right. Well, that's what we got. Thank you guys for listening. If you're still here at 46 minutes and 18 seconds, Thank you for listening. You are the reason that we do this. We hope that you're inspired and or educated in some way, shape, or form. But we're grateful for each and every one of you. Smash the like button, as they say. Share it with your friends. God bless you guys. We love you. See you next time.